Hi everyone, welcome to the final installment of my Flute Fundamentals videos, in which I'd like to talk to you a bit about the history of the flute, how we got to where we are today, and at the end of the video give you some pointers as to repertoire and books that I think every flutist should have in their library. So behind me you'll notice a couple of flutes that look very different from one another. And starting from this side here, we have a flute that is probably the earliest flute, I think, in my collection. It is a modern replica, as are the other two historical instruments, based on originals that are found in various museums around the world. For this first one, it is a modern copy that is based on an original in a museum in Switzerland. First thing you'll notice is the material is different, right? So this is a flute made of boxwood with plastic fittings. The original flute is by JeanJacques Repair, who was one of the leading Parisian woodwind makers of the 18th century, 17th and 18th century. The original dates from somewhere around 1660. This particular flute, for starters, is unique in its construction, in that it has one key here for E flat, and it is a conical instrument, meaning that it is cone-shaped, so there is a taper both internally and externally in the body and the foot joint. However, the head joint is completely cylindrical, or round, so there is no taper. On the modern flute, it is the other way around. The head joint itself has a taper to the top end, to the crown end, and the body is cylindrical. Part of the reasoning for that was in evenness of tone, evenness in intonation, and also additional volume. Now this flute, another interesting fact about it is that it's pitched at 392, A392. In modern orchestras we tune to A441, A442, and this is approximately a whole step down. So if I play a D on this flute, you will hear a C if you have perfect pitch. So a very different sound from what we're used to on the modern flute. This is also a copy by Simon Pollack of the Netherlands. For my second example, I have a flute here that's slightly later, about 50 or 60 years later. The original is from 1720. It's present in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. This is a ebony flute by Rod Cameron out of Mendocino, California. This one is pitched at A415, which is approximately a half step below modern pitch. So you notice it's a much beefier tone. It's not just the change in material, but also the change in construction. This flute, unlike the boxwood instrument, is a four-part flute. And flute makers realized that if they split the middle joint into smaller parts, they had more control over the interior design and also the tone holes and intonation. Fast forwarding here to about anywhere from 1780 to 1810, we start seeing the addition of keys on an instrument. This is an instrument by Rudolf Tutz of Innsbruck, Austria, based on a Heinrich Grenzer, a German family of instrument makers that made instruments spanning from one-keyed flutes all the way through to numerous keyed instrument flutes and oboes and clarinets as well. You'll notice that there is the low C that we see on a modern flute as well, so that's when this starts to come in around the late 18th century and stays pretty close in fashion. And these keys facilitate the bad notes on a Baroque flute. So the Baroque flute is in the key of D major, and anything outside of the key of D major that involves flats, naturals, you're getting into territories that start sounding very uneven in quality of tone. These keys create an instrument that can play a chromatic scale very well in tune. Whereas if I tried to do that with the old Baroque flute fingerings, it works, but it's significantly harder, and also each note has a different quality of sound. So this flute, interestingly, is pitched at A430. Now, 392, 415, and 430 are all modern, contemporary inventions for pitch standard. these original flutes are all pitched at different tonalities. So we have, anything from 405, 390, 402, 427, 465, and modern makers in their mathematic prowess and knowledge of physics have been able to renegotiate these scales and pitches to these three standards. So these are the most common. Others do exist, but this flute is particularly interesting at 430, where it is neither a quarter step or a half step away from 440. It is just in between. So you have a bit of a difficult time adjusting to this if you have perfect pitch. And so that brings us to our modern flute design, of course, pioneered by Theobald Böhm, as we would say in America. That being said, it's gone through a significant number of changes. Flutes, their materials, their designs, their construction have all been helped by modern mechanical engineering, and also the continuing innovative nature of flute makers themselves. But here we have, a completely even instrument from bottom all the way to the top. That's something that these flute makers in their time, of the original instruments anyway, would never have imagined possible. So we really are able to do so much more on a modern flute, but knowing the limitations and the very special qualities of the historical instruments is so beneficial to us. So when you're preparing early music, be it Mozart or Bach or Beethoven, even Brahms, Schubert, listen to some of these older instruments. Find recordings using historical instruments if you can, and listen to how different it is, because those limitations are the limitations that those composers lived with and knew. They would have never known a flute that was so easy to play as this. And I know when I say that this flute is easy to play, that's saying quite a bit. Of course it's not, but those flutes kind of pose a special set of challenges that we have to overcome as performers, but it's incredibly enlightening. So I encourage you to explore the world of early music, even if only in your listening. I'd like to just take you through a few options of repertoire. This is a daunting thing for anyone, for any student, any parent, because I know buying music costs a lot of money, but it's a very worthwhile investment, one that will continue giving back to you throughout your flute playing career. I have notes in some of these books going back from my first flute lessons, and for me to open these books today and still be able to learn from them and still be able to work from them and also see what I was working on back when I first started, it's incredibly moving. So I encourage you whenever possible to buy your own music. IMSLP.org is an incredible organization. What they've done for us in terms of making music accessible to everyone is huge. If you haven't had a chance to explore that website yet, please do. IMSLP.org, type in flute and piano. You will find so much music that you never knew existed, and they're adding things day after day. So always try and make sure that you're getting as decent an edition as possible. This is the difference between buying music and finding it on the internet. When you buy music from a reputable publishing house, you are buying hours of editing. You are buying hours of expertise going through and making sure that there are no or as few mistakes as possible. Of course, a lot of these publications are not perfect, and they have to, work within their own realm of possibility. But I'm going to take you through some rep that I think is really good for young people. This is the book that I referenced in the Scales and Arpeggios video, the Taffanel and Gobert 17 Big Daily Finger Exercises is the English title. It's published by Alphonse Leduc. Last time I checked, I think this book was about $30, which is a significant investment, but the music in here will keep you busy for many years to come, and it truly is a standard. Now, the next book that I wanted to take you through was the Moïse de la Sonorité, which I referenced in my first video. This is a very thin book, also published by Alphonse Leduc, with a great picture of Moïse. It is now the classic photo for all productions of this and his other works. It's a fairly expensive book, but one of the benefits of this in particular is that there is a very nice amount of writing in here where you can understand Moïse's approach to the flute playing, to these exercises, his take on rhythm, dynamics, and also metronomic markings, and really get a feel for his approach to flute playing, which was one of the fundamental approaches of the French flute school to have ever walked the face of the earth. Now, for something that is a little bit more technique-based, but not in an exercise form, here we have Reichert, daily exercises. This is an incredibly technical book. There are no articulations in it at all. There are no dynamics whatsoever. Very few instructions, basically finger buster exercises, where you are just going to sit down and put in the time to master the technique. It's not that large of a book. It's not that expensive. It's published by Schott, and I believe it's probably about $15 or $18 now. Very, very good. Highly recommend it. It will keep you busy for many years. For those of you who might be a little bit more advanced, looking for something a little bit more musical in your technical exercises, the Böhm Caprice Etudes, also published by Schott, are invaluable. Obviously, this is the same Böhm who redesigned the flute, and he was well aware of the limitations and possibilities of his own invention. So these will give you a little bit more of a musical experience in your technique building, something that maybe, won't feel as grueling. And now something that I think we've all probably seen at one point or another, the Selected Studies by Voxman, published by Hal Leonard or Rubank. This is a very affordable book. This is a compilation, essentially, from across the classical and Baroque eras through to the Romantic Etudes of Andersen. This is a book that a lot of high school students will bring to lessons because it's just got such a wide variety of options. If you buy nothing else, this is a good place to start. It's not the most beautifully edited thing. It's not the most accurate in terms of the historic numbers in here, but it is a really, really great starting ground for young flutists. When we're going into serious repertoire, I'd like to just say a few words about Bach and Mozart. A lot of us will have requirements to play Mozart concerti or a Bach sonata throughout our lives. If you're auditioning for colleges, if you're auditioning for summer festivals, if you are auditioning for any kind of competition, generally they will ask, at least for the Mozart G major concerto, if not a Mozart concerto of your choice, either G or D, and a Bach sonata. These are the two most aggrieved composers, I think, in editorial history because of the popularity. Everyone has an old book that probably cost about $3 of the Bach sonatas. Everyone has a really crummy edition of the Mozart concerti. I implore you all to take a little bit of extra money and buy quality editions. You really do get what you pay for. And in this case, I have two editions here for Bach and Mozart each. All of it is Bärenreiter. Bärenreiter color codes their composers, so Bach is blue, Mozart is red. These are Urtext. I also have the Henley editions. Those are also a wonderful place to look. Urtext basically means original text. It means there's been very little editing done, and if there has been editing that was absolutely necessary, they will tell you what it is that they've done. They've changed from Mozart or Bach's, or Beethoven's for that matter, handwriting. It's so important for us as musicians to know why we're playing what we're playing and to not just play the ink on the page. The best part about this is that you don't just have to stick with what's in these books. You have a clean slate here to create your own edition, especially in the Mozart concerti. I think everyone has their own ideas on articulation, their own passages that they like to change a little bit with the way they tongue or if they tongue. In editions that are clean, completely clean, you have a fresh start and you can put all of your own preferred methods in. Highly recommend it. They're not actually that much more expensive than your typical mid-level edition. I think the Mozarts are around $20 or $25 each. The Bachs may be a little bit more. But you will actually save money in the long run by not going to those low-level Bach, mid-level Bach, and then finally caving and buying the Bärenreiter because you're so frustrated. These are pieces you will have with you your entire career, and I really encourage you to investigate these options. I hope that's helpful. Feel free to reach out with any questions you may have. I'm happy to answer them, whether they're about etude books, repertoire, good places to buy these things. I'm all ears, all right? Thank you, everybody, and stay well.